Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul. I am a nerd, and you are lucky enough to be attending the August 2014 PracticeMaster Virtual User Group meeting. Say that 3 times fast. Today, we are covering 2 topics. We are talking about changing and managing holidays. I bet a lot of people didn't even know you could manage your holidays in PracticeMaster. Mary Jo is going to tell you how and why. And I am going to talk about something a lot of people have been asking about lately, conflict of interest searching in PracticeMaster and what I recommend as best practices. So we're going to talk about how to do it, and I'm going to talk about what I feel is the best way to search. But before we do that, a little bit of a preamble here, a little bit of housekeeping. I'm going to tell you about this little screen here, which you may or may not be looking at on your screen at home. This is the GoToWebinar control panel. And if you're looking at it, it is because you have not clicked this button that looks like an arrow pointing to the right, because clicking that button will cause this to slide off the right-hand side of your screen. When you click on that, and when it does slide off the right-hand side of the screen, this then changes to a button where the arrows point to the left, and that means that clicking that button again will cause this to slide back into focus. Now, why would you want it to slide back into focus? Well, because you're shy and you have a question. If you want to type a question for us to answer, type it here. Remember to hit send, and Leanne, our humble and faithful moderator who is back after a months-long vacation, or what would have seemed like it since she wasn't here last month, Leanne, our humble moderator, will recognize that you have a question. She will interrupt Mary Jo and myself at just the right time. She will ask your question on your behalf, and we will answer it. Now, if you find that A, we are not answering the question you intended us to answer, or B, you have follow-up questions, just keep typing them here. Keep remembering to hit send, and Leanne will keep interrupting us at the opportune moment and asking your follow-up questions on your behalf. If you're not feeling shy, you can also click this button. It looks like a hand with an arrow pointing upward in front of it. That means raise your hand. If you raise your hand, Leanne will do the same thing. She'll interrupt us at just the right time, but instead of reading your question on your behalf, she will unmute you and you can ask your own question. That line of communication, that channel of communication will remain open. You will remain unmuted until we have answered your question, and that means that if you have follow-up questions or you find that we're not answering the question that you're asking, just keep talking to us, keep interrupting us, because you're able to talk to us as if you were sitting right here in this very room. So, without further ado, I will press all of the appropriate magic buttons so that Mary Jo will be in just the right place to tell you about holidays.
So one of the things out of PracticeMaster, out of the box, is the holidays by venue in the calendar, which is all of the standard holidays that are recognized in the U.S. That's New Year's, it's Easter, it's Memorial Day, Independence Day, Christmas, Thanksgiving, and so on. But at your law firm, you may want to modify that. Maybe your firm takes the day after Thanksgiving off, or the day after Christmas, or Christmas Eve, or one of those things that you want to add that into the calendar so that your employees know when they're looking at their calendar that that is an official holiday of your firm. That's one scenario. Maybe we've got another one where you observe other holidays in addition to the standard holidays. Maybe you recognize Canadian Independence Day. I don't know what it was. Or maybe you do the Jewish holidays, and you want to put the Jewish holidays in there as well. A couple different things that we can do here. You can modify the existing holidays that are in there and just add them to your main calendar. You can create a second or third or fourth holiday by venue and name it whatever you want. So maybe you want the standard holidays that your firm is going to take on one venue, and you want all the Jewish holidays on another venue, or maybe there is courts that observe different holidays and are closed on different days than what your firm is, and you want to just create a new venue, but you don't want to actually merge that into your live holiday venue. You just want a separate one. So we can create a new venue as well. So let's go in and find out where we do that. So first of all, I'm just going to go under my calendar tab up here, and I'm going to go into the holidays by venue. So when I click on that, it's going to list out all the standard holidays in red that are currently for 2014. These are the out-of-the-box calendar holidays that it thinks is standard. You'll notice that if I get off of today, in my sample data, it thinks it's November 17th, so today shows up as a blue date. Everything else is black. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to modify this. So just by having it up on my screen, opening up the standard holidays, and if you look at my drop-down right now, I do have one that's called Jewish holidays. I haven't really set it all up that way, but I would have a list of all the different venues that I had set up that I can flip back and forth between, or I can then add new venues. So I'm on the standard right now. So let's say that your firm takes the day after Thanksgiving off. So I'm going to go to November, and if I just double-click it, and I get off of that date, you can see I've turned that date red. Now, if I get back on there, I also have a place. I just turned it off. Let me turn it on, double-click it. I can give it a holiday description. So I could say that this is day after Thanksgiving, or whatever description that you want to give it. You know, maybe it's in our case, maybe it's a ACS holiday, or you know, an official firm holiday, whatever that is. Now I am limited there. You can see it cut it off there a little bit. So I have a limited amount of characters that I can type in, but I can just, you know, whatever it is, so that we can let the rest of the firm know what's going on. That will show up on the calendar that way, as whatever description I type here. So we want to make sure it's whatever we want. I'm just going to leave it as that for now. If I wanted to add the day after Christmas, I can say that that is a holiday. Again, double-click it, it turns it red, and it makes this so that I can give it an additional description there that will show on the calendar. Once I've added all of the dates here to this existing calendar, I can then just go ahead, and if I go to exit out, it'll ask if I want to save it, and I would save that particular venue. Now, if I want to add a new venue, so I'm going to actually close, and it's going to ask me if I want to save, and I'll say yes. And so now I've got that one in there. I'm going to go back into my holidays by venue, and I'm going to add a new venue. So if I click the Add New, and I'm going to call this Jewish Holiday 2, since I've already got one in there, and say OK. And you'll see that I still have the standard holidays in here. And it's actually taking the standard holidays from what I already had in there, what I mark for my firm standard holidays. It almost makes like a copy of that as my default. But if I click on any of these red dates, you'll see there's nothing defined in there. So I would want to clear these out. I'm just going to uncheck these, because sometimes you want just a completely fresh. You don't want those standard holidays on this one. You just want just the Jewish holidays. So I'm going to put Hanukkah in. So that would be in 2014. It's going to be from the 16th through the 24th. So I would double-click on each one of these and give it a description of Hanukkah. And then I can come into 17, 18, 19, and I'm double-clicking on each one all the way through the 24th. And I can put in there, you know, I can type on each one if I wanted to and name it Hanukkah. I could, you know, just leave those all in red. It's whatever you want to do there. And I could put all of the Jewish holidays on there, and I could save this, and then that would actually have just those holidays. And if this were a court, again, if this was, they were observing certain holidays, I could make one for, you know, XYZ court, and then put all of their holidays on here. And then I can flip through and look at these on my calendar as well. So, and you can also merge. If I wanted to merge this in with my existing calendar, I could do that. And if I want to delete a venue, I could do that. So I can just say delete this. I want this one off of here. Close, get out. I'm not going to save that, those changes. But that's where I go to make those additional venues, or where I go to change my existing holidays to reflect what my firm is actually observing. So again, calendar, holidays by venue. I can bring up the one I want to modify or change, or I can add a new one, or I can copy one, and then I can actually merge things back and forth. If we look at my calendar on one of those holidays, and we'll go over to November, I'm going to do the monthly view here. You can see that I've got the Thanksgiving Day and the day after Thanksgiving. And you would probably name that something shorter anyway, but that would be on there for me to see.
Now, would you also probably spell Thanksgiving right on the day
Probably,
after? Okay.
yeah,
Just
yeah. You know, I was already out of character, so I was trying to shorten it up there. I'm going to stick with that story that I meant to do that. But yeah, that's where you would actually see it on here. So
there's a character limit there. It must be something around 20 characters on this.
Looks like it. And you can see that on, if I went to help, it would tell me how many that was if I was in that screen.
So that's something to consider, too, when you name them.
Yep.
Because you don't want it to be misspelled the day after Thanksgiving.
Right. Well, then the other thing that you can do, if I go into my calendar tab and I go to my calendar properties, you can actually choose what holidays you're viewing. So you can change this venue to show those holidays, or the ones that you've, any of the additional venues that you've created. It's going to default to being the standard holidays. But if you did want your calendar to show the new one that you've created, you can go in and you can modify it in your calendar properties. And again, these are user specific. So if you have one user that needs to see the Jewish holidays and another user that's using the standard, or if you needed to see both, whatever you needed to do there, you could change this by user in their calendar properties to see those venues that you've created.
Now, of course, you can only have one, so most firms, I think, are pretty much just going to mess around with the standard holidays and add those Jewish holidays, because they're probably not going to say, we're only half closed on that day. But if you do have Jewish holidays, or if you have some other group of holidays that a certain group of people observe and others don't, you probably want to make sure they do include the standard holidays, because you're either using this one or that one or that one or that one.
But you can change it. You can go back and forth just by in your properties choosing which one you want to look at the moment.
That's
so it's just like viewing different views of your task list or daily or whatever. You're just going to come in and say, okay, I need to see the Jewish holidays now, so I'm going to change it to Jewish holidays, say okay, go watch my calendar, I'm going to see all those holidays on there.
Right.
Or if you just wanted to see it in one group, you can always go into that holidays by venue. Don't make any changes, just bring up the one that you want to look at, and you'll see all of them in the whole year of where those are at. So there's a lot of different options there with holidays by venue. But like Paul said, a lot of people don't even know that you can change that. I've had several calls and questions of, hey, we're not observing the day before Christmas, we're just observing the day after. Or we're not observing the day after, we're observing the day before, and so on. So this is where you can actually put that in when you get that information and it's out there for everyone to see.
Or that one character guy called us and he said we don't observe Christmas at all because his name was Scrooge McDuck. So you got.
There you go.
That was pretty lame, wasn't it?
That was. On that note, I'll turn it over to you, Paul, to talk about conflict searching.
Okay, so we're going to talk about conflict of interest searching. Now I'm going to go into search and I'm going to click on conflict of interest search. I always press Shift-Alt-C. There's also an icon for it right here. And of course, we all know that the icons that you customize on your main tab are what appear up here. So if you have conflict on your main tab, you can click on it here. You can always click search and conflict search, and we get this. Now, I left it this way because I wanted you to understand that there are indexes that are involved with the conflict search. So they need to be maintained, and it's not a bad idea to re-index conflict searching every month when you do month-end close, or at some point, maybe every 2 months. It depends on how often you're adding data to PracticeMaster. But if you don't do this, then your conflict of interest searching becomes less and less and less relevant and less accurate. So it's recommended as best practice that you re-index your conflict indexes every month. Now, here's where you go to do that. I'm going to get out of conflict search, and I'm going to go back into search settings. First we click on search, then we click on search settings. And first I want to point out that you merely check all the boxes. I recommend all of them. You want to remove deleted records. That's my take on the best practice. You may not have all these boxes available to you to check, because if you have something that used to be available called PracticeMaster Basic, it doesn't allow you, for instance, to link documents, so it's not going to have that available as something to do. So just check all the boxes that are available for you to check. Now, another thing I want to point out is that you want to make sure that these are set to automatic. That means it's automatically updating your conflict of interest indexes. If you don't do this, that means the only time they'll become re-indexed, or the only time they'll be maintained, is when you re-index them. Setting them to automatic means that it tries to maintain the conflict of interest search indexes all the time, but it's it's better still if you re-index every month, just as a best practice. And you do also have this thing called the exclude list. In other words, what words that you might search for would you not want to include in a search, like a and all and the. So if you have words that you want to add to this list or that you want to delete, you can come in here and modify this exclude list and tell it what it should or should not include in a conflict search. So that said, I'm going to very quickly rebuild these indexes. I'm going to cross my fingers and hope it takes about, maybe another 10 seconds. Yep, there we go. Be aware, we have one client, we're running this, they run it from the server because it runs much faster there, and it takes about 2.5 hours, 3 hours. So it's not something you just want to start at 8 o'clock knowing that people are going to start to arrive for work at 8:30. If you have that sort of a situation, be aware of how long it takes and only run it when you're sure you can get it done.
And Paul, I'm just going to add 2 things to that before you move on to show the actual conflict searching. This is an exclusive task to PracticeMaster, so nobody can be in PracticeMaster when you rebuild these indexes. So make sure you're doing it early in the morning or after hours so that you're not, keeping people out of the system, especially if you've got a large amount of data that takes a long time to run. And then the other thing is that this always has to be rebuilt after you do an update. So if you go from 16 to 17 and you're updating there, it's going to send a message on there. And some people don't exactly know what that means after they convert their data, that it says that the indexes will be cleared. And this is what it's talking about. You need to go in here and you have to actually rebuild these search indexes.
That's right.
So we're not doing the update for you because we'll automatically do that. And you're doing it on your own. Make sure that you go in and you run these indexes. It has to be redone.
One more thing to be aware of that you just reminded me of, Mary Jo, is if you go into file maintenance, if you happen to be somebody that goes into file maintenance, and you edit fields that affect the conflict search, it won't tell you till after you've told it to go ahead and do that, but it will wipe those searches. It will wipe those indexes. So if I'm in a firm, if I'm in the firm where it takes 2.5 to 3 hours and I'm doing some maintenance on their file structure early in the morning to add certain fields for certain areas of practice, whatever, and I get that notice, it's not good because that means they can't do conflict of interest searches all day because we're not going to start the search reindex at 7 o'clock when it takes 3 hours to complete and keeps people out of PracticeMaster. So be aware that if you're making those types of changes, you may be doing something that's going to affect these conflict of interest search indexes and affect your ability to do a conflict search. That said, let's look at doing conflict searches. So I'm going to click the button this time. First off, when you're doing a real conflict search, it's best to have all the boxes checked. You want to search everything. So people say sometimes, why is it better? I've heard it's better to do a conflict search in PracticeMaster than tabs. It's simple. In PracticeMaster, you have a lot more information. If you're using it for document management, all your documents are linked to PracticeMaster, and therefore they're getting searched too. Much more information about your clients and your contacts is available in PracticeMaster than is in tabs. In tabs, you don't have emails journaled or tagged to specific matters. In PracticeMaster, you do, and those emails will be searched, as will the documents that are attached to them, as will the body of the email itself. So you're getting a much better group of results when you do your conflict search in PracticeMaster. The flip side of that is that you are getting a lot more results, so you have more to search through. But of course, in conflict of interest searching, more is better. You really do want to find the conflict if it exists, but there's a fine line that you walk there because if you get 108 pages of results, you have to narrow it somehow. So what do we check on up here? I always say must match all words. If I type Paul Purdue, and I've got must match at least one word, I'm going to find a lot of stuff because it's going to look for anybody that has either Paul or Purdue, whereas if I have must match all words, it's going to look for anybody that has Paul and Purdue, not or. Okay? So I always recommend must match all words. The next thing is anywhere within a record versus any order within the same field versus exact order in the same field. Some people like this. This means that Paul and Purdue would have to appear in the same field. Doesn't matter where. It could be backwards. It could be flipped. It could be Paul Edward Purdue. Yes, that is my middle name. It could be anything, but as long as Paul and Purdue appeared in the same field. Now, when it comes to a situation where you want to narrow results, this is probably a good idea. This is going to return instances where somebody named Paul sent an email that mentions Purdue University, or where somebody named Paul may work for Purdue University, but not just people where Paul and Purdue end up in the same field. So you're probably pretty well off with this. I tend to use this because when I'm doing a conflict search, I don't run into as much data as certain law firms. So here you've got a decision for your firm as to whether or not you're going to use anywhere within a record. That would be anywhere in the client record in any field, or any two fields these two words would be able to appear, versus anywhere within the same field. Now, I always do match partial words and starts with. And I don't do contains. Let me just explain. If I was searching for Paul, and I found somebody, and I'm just going to type here so you can see, I'm not typing here to search for this. If there was somebody in there named Pauline, and I've got starts with, it'll find it even though I only typed Paul. Keep in mind, this is what it would find. If I type Paul, it will find Pauline whether I say starts with or contains. If I instead, I think that's the name of a university, if I have starts with, it will not find Paul within this word, but if I have contains, it will find Paul within that word. My idea of the best practice for what to set this on is match partial words and starts with. Now, let's search for Paul Purdue. And I'm going to preview my results. And we found Paul Purdue in 3 records. Okay? So, pretty narrow search. In a minute, I'll show you what happens when we click on these various things here. But let's go back to that search box and talk a little bit more about that. Now, you'll notice when I click on match partial words, phonetic search goes away. And when I click on phonetic search, match partial words goes away. Why they didn't put a radio button here instead of checkboxes, I don't know. But you can only have one or the other. Okay? What's the difference between partial words and phonetic? If I type Paul Purdue like the school, and the word Purdue spelled like the chicken, which for those of you who don't know is P-E-R-D-U-E, and I have phonetic search checked, it will find it even though it's not spelled exactly the same because it sounds the same. So what do I recommend? I recommend that you start a search with partial words, you do your search, and if you get back, let's say 10 or 15 or more pages of results, that you try the search again with phonetic search checked. That way you get to narrow it down, and I'm sorry, I said that backwards. If you try it first with, let me say this again, let me start over. If you try it with match partial words and you get maybe 2 hits and what you're looking for is not found, try it again by going a little broader and checking phonetic search, and you might find what you're looking for there. I would say that if you search this way first and then this way and you still don't get a hit, you probably don't have a conflict. Okay? Now keep in mind, when my father was just starting out as a patent attorney in the, the 40s, a long time ago, let's say a long time ago, he worked at a firm called Owen & Owen, and when they wanted to do a conflict search, Alan Owen, who was the lead attorney, would walk to his office door and would yell down the hall, "Does anybody know who Paul Purdue is?" So this is going to be a much better search than that sort of a search. But times aren't nearly as simple as they were then. So this is my best practices. Phrase match, match all words. Word order, I say anywhere within a record, but some people want to narrow it a little and say anywhere within the same field. Search options, start with match partial words and starts with. If that doesn't find something, finds a very low number of hits, you can expand a little bit and try a phonetic search and see if you get anything more. And then finally, what do you check down here? Everything. There's no reason not to search something. You're doing a conflict search. You want to search absolutely everything to see if this person's name comes up.
And Paul, I'm just going to add just 2 things here because we're in sample data, so we're not always seeing all of the fields that we have like in live data. So if you have World Docs, there will also be a button in there that you can actually search through the World Docs documents as well.
That's true.
And then if you don't have World Docs and you store your documents in PracticeMaster using our document management feature, you can text search documents through the conflict search. So if you're looking for a certain phrase in a document that you have saved in PracticeMaster, you can search it here and it's text searchable. A lot of people ask, well, why would I want to save it in PracticeMaster? I've already got it out on my, in my computer and on the drive, somewhere in a folder. Why do I need to put it in here too? It's another step. Well, that you can't text search your your drives, out on your computer very easily. So here you can actually text search a document if you save it in PracticeMaster, or if you use World Docs, there would actually be a button up in, I believe it's on your search options, and it will say, to search through the World Docs document. So you've got a couple of extra options there.
Yep, very good. Now let's do this search real quick, and I want to show you a couple things about the results that you get. You will get a hit for each occurrence. And so here's a journal record that contains in the email body the word Paul Purdue. Here's a fee that contains in the description the words Paul Purdue. And here's another fee that also contains Paul Purdue. If I click on the client name and number, it will load the client. And I can sort through those fields within the client file. If instead you click on the word that represents which record it is that it found it in, it will actually open the record where it was found. And I think that's the same thing that happens if you click on the words themselves. It opens the record. So be aware that if you click on either of these two things, either the hit itself or the indication of which file it found it in, you'll be opening the actual record that contains the actual words. Whereas if you click over here, if you will open up the actual client and maybe not the record that contains the words. So here I'm opening a journal record, but here I'm opening the client file just to look a little further and see, well, why would Paul Purdue be tied to this client? Or here to see, well, where is Paul Purdue tied to this client? Important distinction and an important thing to understand when you're doing this. Of course, if you print this out hard copy, you don't have those hyperlinks, so be careful of that. One other thing I want to show you is that if you go into file maintenance, be aware, or your administrator should be aware, or somebody who's maintaining your files should be aware, that when we go into the fields, one of the things is whether or not it is included in a conflict search and whether it's included in the conflict report. What these two things mean is this field, address 1, in the client file even searched for a conflict? No, that's turned off. So there may be fields in here that out of the box are turned off, or there may be fields that somebody's added where we don't include it in a conflict search. Well, that's not true, because at some point they get to where they aren't. They're automatically included. Exactly. Now, what it means when it says include on conflict report, that doesn't mean is it going to be included when we search. It means is it going to show up on the resulting report. So just to be clear, I'm going to take this field called address 1, and I'm going to say that it should be included on the conflict report. Or I'm going to actually take city, and I'm going to include it in the conflict report, but I am not going to include it in the search, just to illustrate. Yes, I want to save, and I'm going to close. And I'm going to go do a search, a conflict search, and I'm going to search for Paul Purdue. Well, I'm going to search for Larson because I want to find a client. And I am now including the city when I show a client. That's a journal document management. Let's go down to client. When I show a client record, I'm going to include the city right there. See that? I didn't search in the city field for conflicts. If I had typed Lincoln, I wouldn't have found this. But it may be important for you when you see the results to see the city that that client's in. That's what include on report means, as opposed to include in search means will it be something that's searched for the word that is being searched for. I hope that's clear. Leanne, do we have hands going up because I've confused people with that?
No, I don't see any hands.
Do you have any questions?
Nope.
Okay, so those are the two distinctions, but you want to be, among other, above all else, not only do you want to understand what those things mean, but you want to know that they're there, because you may be ignoring a field in a search that where you could turn on include in search, but it hasn't been turned on. So it's something that's worth reviewing. And you don't have to come into file maintenance to do this. If you're the person who maintains fields, you can go to file definition report and, for instance, print a definition of the client file. and one of the columns is going to be include in conflict and include in conflict report, and you'll be able to see for each field whether or not it's included in the conflict search and whether or not it's included in the conflict report. So that was conflict searching in a nutshell and our best practices. Hopefully that's helpful to people. Next month, in our PracticeMaster virtual user group meeting, we're going to be talking about the daily report, not that show with John Stewart, but a report that you can print on a daily basis that shows you tasks and events and certain other items that may be of interest to you on a daily basis. And then Mary Jo's going to cover that, and I'm going to talk about these search boxes that have been added recently that let you find things even more exactly than you could before and even easier than you could before. I want to mention that people ask us, when is my version going to be sunsetted? Sunsetted means that STI will stop supporting it. We've received notification that version 15, whether it's 15.1 or 15.2, if you have version 15, they will stop supporting it in June of 2015. June of 2015. So you have a year to figure out what you need to do, because once they stop supporting it, a lot of things happen, including the fact that if you were to upgrade after they stop supporting it, you have to send your data to them to be converted, because the routines to convert your data are at that point no longer shipped in the CD or shipped in the software. Our website, as many of you know, has all of our recorded content. So if you go to attorneycomputersystems.com, I emphasize the S on the end of systems, you will find the Tabs 3 Virtual User Group, the PracticeMaster Virtual User Group, the WorldDocs Virtual User Group, and, well, I chose WorldDocs. Let's go to PracticeMaster since that's where we are right now. This is how you register for the current webinar or the current VUG, Virtual User Group meeting. But if you scroll down, recorded versions of all the past events, past Virtual User Group meetings are here, and there's a wealth of information. In addition, we have these things called coffee pot webinars that I give every month on a certain topic, or usually an add-on product or something that will help you enhance the value of your software. Mary Jo has her eBytes video series, very short, very succinct and to the point videos on a very specific feature and how it can change your life forever. And then we have the TV show format, the Paul and Mary Jo show, where both of us go into a little bit more detail on a topic, usually a broader topic, and give a lot of useful information there. So keep in mind, next month, the daily report in the search box. Everybody have a good afternoon, good rest of the week, and we will see you next month. Thanks much. Bye-bye.